2021 has just flown by. We're days away from 2022, so we're going to stop and rank all 9 theatrically released comic book movies from the worst to the best. In last place, Eternals. Fresh off winning Oscars for Best Director and Best Picture for the movie Nomadland, Chloe Zhao brings those prestige ambitions to the MCU. Here we get probably the best looking MCU film we have ever gotten. A film that is thematically rich with a deep mythology, but also probably the most polarizing film in the entire MCU.
Inconceivable.
A bunch of people look at this movie and they see this great study of broken heroes, complex characters where good and bad aren't entirely clear, and where there's competing values driving their actions. And it tackles a bunch of complex, interesting philosophical questions.
This means something. This is important.
So for some people, this is one of the absolute best films in the MCU, if not the best film in the MCU. And for people like me, it was an overcrowded film with too many characters, too many plot lines, too many big important questions to stuff into just one film. I look at a film where there's 10 brand new lead characters that have to be introduced while playing catch up with where they're at. So the first 90 plus minutes of this film is just introducing characters. And the movie's attempt at moral complexity leads to a third act where the heroes are debating whether they should save humans, which is a little bit of a strange moral dilemma to put in a movie which you are marketing to humans to watch. It has such lofty ambitions with so many characters, so many plot lines, so many important questions that it just crumbles under the weight of it all. And honestly, I'm truly baffled why they didn't make this a Disney Plus series, but it wasn't, so it didn't work. Real quick before I give you the rest of my list, while you're watching, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all the comic book movies of 2021. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Number 8, Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins. Now this is a movie that should have been a standalone, generic Ninja Yakuza movie, not a G.I. Joe film. At its core, there are a number of interesting character dynamics, complex motives, and some fun underground crime elements going on with the revenge story at the exact same time. But this isn't a generic Ninja Yakuza movie, it's a G.I. Joe movie, and it's called Snake Eyes, and the lead character is absolutely nothing like Snake Eyes on the most basic fundamental list. This guy is a jerk. He's not particularly heroic. He talks all the time, and he doesn't put the helmet on until the last minute of the movie.
Not a great plan.
Everything that is distinctive and true about Snake Eyes, his character, and the fact that he wears a very specific uniform, never takes his helmet off, and doesn't talk. That's who Snake Eyes is. And that's not what this movie is whatsoever, in which case you're just watching it the entire time, so frustrated at this character assassin for Snake Eyes. Even as a generic Ninja Yakuza movie, the action isn't shot all that well. There are some problems even beyond that. So not a great movie, even if it was just a ninja movie. And as a G.I. Joe film, it is an insult and an attack on the title character. Then we have Venom, Let There Be Carnage. For me, this was a significant improvement over the original film. The best part of the first Venom was the weird bromance relationship between Eddie and Venom, and once the two of them were joined together, the movie became a lot of fun just watching their crazy, weird hijinks in this bizarre performance from Tom Hardy.
I was meant to eat everybody! Promise! I promise! Oh yeah!
And this movie continues that concept of this odd couple relationship, and right out of the gate, we have the two of them already together in the middle of all their antics, and we get the introduction of our villain, Cletus Carnage, right there from the beginning. So everything that I wanted from this film is present throughout all the runtime. Woody Harrelson is a lot of fun playing absolute insane psychopaths. I like the idea of him on this Bonnie and Clyde road trip. And it's a movie that just trimmed off all the fat, so it just focuses in on the entertainment value, the roller coaster ride, so it never slows down.
Outstanding.
Now, to that point, this is a movie that has absolutely no depth. It even forgets to explain how Carnage is different from Venom, and so it makes the rules of the universe a little bit confusing. It's a kind of a waste of Carnage to introduce him just to kill him off 30, 45 minutes later after he's brought into the cinematic universe. And so this isn't great cinema, but it is a fun comic book B movie. Number 6, Black Widow, the missing Phase 3 Marvel movie that came out 5 years too late after the title character had died as the kickoff to Phase 4.
Wow, that was weird.
Unusual timing aside, I think that this was a fun little spy movie inside of the MCU. One thing the MCU does really well is incorporating a bunch of different genres in while at the same time making them feel like MCU films, and that's what this does. It is this espionage spy family film about them getting back together, reuniting. The real standouts here are Florence Pugh and David Harbour, who I just thought were just so much fun as their characters. In particular, Florence Pugh, she just has such a nice energy, charm about her, and she's really funny.
This thing that you do when you whip your hair when you're fighting. It's a fighting pose. You're a total poser.
I'm not a poser.
All that said, I mean, there are some big, gigantic problems here. Taskmaster was an enormous dud, where it turned out instead of this being one of the next great villains, it's just basically a remote-controlled human that's designed as a plot device, is a henchman with a backstory. And then as you move into the third act, it goes full-blown video game sequence where we're in a sky base, falling out of the sky, running on buildings and fighting. It's like, what are we doing? Not amazing, but I enjoyed it enough. I liked getting this final little piece with Natasha, getting to understand her backstory. In 5th place, The King's Man. Now, this is a movie I saw it a couple weeks before it hit theaters, and I posted my review for it before I had heard anyone else's take on the film, and I really dug the film. Felt it was a prequel that stood alone as a story. It wasn't answering questions I wasn't asking about the universe, but it did flesh things out in an interesting and fun way while having its own unique style and vibe, while having the energy of the other Kingsman films at the same time. Historic fan fiction with rewritten versions of Rasputin.
Time to dance on your graves.
Who can dance, fight. But at the core, what made me really enjoy this film was the lead character and his worldview as this former soldier that's turned his back on war, seen how pointless so much of it is, and has seen the cost that has on people, and desperately wants to avoid getting involved with World War I. There's such an emotional current to that, and that's really what worked here. When the action kicks in, just as stylized, just as much fun as the first two films, but I was actually pretty surprised when the Rotten Tomatoes score came out and it was quite low. Here I am! Because that just wasn't my experience with the film. I really dug it. It's actually my favorite of the Kingsman films. Next up, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Once again, the MCU expands what fits into the franchise, this time going full martial arts film, taking huge amounts of inspiration from Asian and especially Hong Kong cinema, and in doing so added a bunch of new layers to the world, gave us one of the best villains in the MCU, also gave us some of the best fights in the entire franchise. And what they did was they pulled from a bunch of different styles of Hong Kong martial arts films, and so you get kind of the Jackie Chan style of fighting and the cadence to his moves, but you also get some of the wire fu that you see in such movies such as Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and so much more. But what really elevated this film for me was the villain, who has so many layers to his motivations. So while he is doing these harsh things, villainous things, so much of his actions in the runtime of the actual film are driven by love. Unfortunately, what held this one back from being like a top tier MCU film for me were all kind of the MCU mandates. So first off, you gotta have a ton of spectacle in your film. And so they didn't trust the awesome choreography to work by itself. So suddenly Shang-Chi's spinning on the outside of a bus and he's dangling from scaffolding. Second thing holding it back was the over-reliance on that MCU humor. So much so that we're in the middle of the final battle and it cuts away to a cheap joke. Third one is the mandatory MCU ties to the rest of the universe. And that's frustrating because it's a movie where I could just imagine that version that was better.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
Where if it just trusted the choreography, didn't rely so much on cheap jokes and cameos, we could have been a top tier MCU film. As is, very good, but not quite top tier. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to join me down below in the comments section, share your list. Also, I'm doing a bunch of these end of the year videos, best of the year, worst of the year, most anticipated for next year, and a ranking of all the movies all the new releases that I saw in 2021. That's gonna be a live stream on the first of the year. Be sure to check that out. In third place, The Suicide Squad. This felt like a project tailor-made for James Gunn, who on the one hand has a history of working with ensembles of quirky, broken characters who find family in this new group, Guardians of the Galaxy. And on the other hand, he is a guy that his general sentiments are dark humor, rated R, crass, abrasive, and that's what The Suicide Squad is supposed to be. And he's pulled a bunch of inspiration from these old 60s and 70s war films like The Dirty Dozen, and in doing so, crafted this truly unique comic book movie that's unlike any other film in the genre. It's not even like the other movie with Suicide Squad in the title because of it. It's so distinctly James Gunn while fitting nicely into the world of the DC characters at the same time.
Impressive. Very nice.
And what's really neat about it is that the characters in and of themselves are just a lot of fun. All of them have something amusing, quirky, strange about them. But then he finds a way to take these ridiculous characters and he's still able to give it like a human current, like human emotion at the core of it. So it's a movie that has humor, it has outrageous antics, but also has a lot of heart. And so I just thought James Gunn was the perfect movie to bring this movie to the big screen, as well as HBO Max, and he nailed it absolutely. It's funny, it's heartfelt, and it's unique and different. Really dug this one. Our runner-up, Spider-Man No Way Home, a movie whose second half is so satisfying, so joy-inducing, and such a gift to the fans that it's very easy to forget that the first half of the movie isn't nearly as good as the second half of the film and uses some really lazy gimmicks to set up the better half of the film.
Are you not entertained?
Now, I went into this movie very skeptical of the basic setup, and the movie didn't really win me over in that regard because the basic premise that everything awesome and epic in this film happens because two impulsive people won't pause for 5 seconds before casting a spell that's going to rewrite the brain waves of billions of people on the Earth.
Stop tampering with the spell.
Oh my God, Ned, he's my best friend. Oh, my Aunt May should...
Including erasing the memories of people that know him the most. Like, that feels very hollow and lazy to me.
Brilliant, but lazy.
But as soon as Peter embarks on his quest to try and fix them, the movie turns awesome. It turns just great. The character dynamics, these villains interacting with each other, when the people that show up in the final segment of the film show up, my crowd was going bananas, including this guy right here.
But that was awesome.
It was so much more fun than I'd actually expected because we all kind of knew who was going to show up in this movie. And then the way they pulled it off, what they did with it, where they took things was so awesome. But more importantly, they also found this subversive way to do Peter Parker's origin story that has an emotional current to it. It's not just fan service. It's not just gimmicks. There's really great stuff in here and great character development. And that's what makes it so frustrating because this movie in the second half has so much potential to easily be number one on this list. But it's also a movie whose setup is not nearly as good as its payoff. But coming in first place, Zack Snyder's Justice League. For some reason, the WB greenlit Zack Snyder shooting a 4-hour Justice League epic only to get cold feet and then used the death of his daughter as an excuse to kind of push him out the door.
You disgust me. How can you live with yourself?
And then decided to replace him with a director with a style that is totally incompatible with Zack Snyder's style, including the cameras that he used and the format that he shot on. And then they instructed him to take the 4-hour epic, shoot an hour of additional footage, and then cut the 5 hours down to a 2-hour movie. What could possibly go wrong?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
And of course, the end result was one of the grossest products a studio has ever put out.
Not impressed.
And I was one of the people that for 2 years was saying we were never going to see Zack Snyder's Justice League actually completed. And I am so happy that I was wrong on that point. So happy to be wrong on that point. And that they actually funded completing the film and they released his proper vision for Justice League. And I thought it was just fantastic.
That's great.
A truly epic superhero story that takes its time to set up each plot point, each character arc. As we move forward, all of it has great excitement to it because the plot is exciting and has emotional weight because we've actually spent time with these characters and we care about the journey that they are on. All of it leading to a series of moments where there's a satisfying conclusion to each of their character arcs, as well as the plot as a whole.
Excellent.
And I am so happy that we actually got it. I thought it was fantastic. I love the scope, the scale, all of it. So it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, I've got more end of the year lists just like this one coming in the near future. They'll be in that playlist right over there. If you're watching this the day that I posted this video, it's a pretty boring playlist because it's just this video, but more will be coming right over there in the near future. Thank you so much for watching and keep talking movies too much.